Throughout the lifespan of video games as a medium, there have been numerous titles that have stood out as classics, masterpieces that everyone who enjoys games should play. In 2005, Sony Japan studio and Team Ico released what would go down as a cult classic and captured the imaginations of people worldwide. Shadow of the Colossus is a game that I had always heard was a tour de force of the PlayStation 2's library, but I never played it until now. With the release of the PlayStation 4 remake, I was eager to jump into this much revered game to see whether or not it stood the test of time. My name is Noah Friskop and welcome to Gridlife Digest review of Shadow of the Colossus for PlayStation 4. Since I refuse to spoil this game, as I imagine many are like me in this case, going in never having played the original, I will only use footage from the first few encounters. The stunning introductory cutscene set the tone and certainly grabbed my attention, but it was when I stared down the first colossi lumbering toward me that I knew I was in for something special. From that moment forward, the veneration the game had received already seemed warranted. This game makes me feel such a specific way. It exudes a sensation that I had not experienced quite like this before and predict never will again. There is a melancholic serenity to its stark landscapes, a deep regret in each of its main goals, coupled with an intensifying dread in the thought of our protagonist, and by extension the player, growing ever more comfortable with his wet work. The heavy price alluded to in the prologue is hammered home with every towering behemoth you slay, and the legitimacy of Wander's Pact naturally comes into question the deeper you descend into the depths of your own morality. These are questions rarely posed in AAA games today, and its blurred enormity remains just as harrowing as I imagine it was in 2005. A significant criticism that both the original release and the remake has received is that of its initially abhorrent control scheme. While it might take some getting used to, and this might sound like an excuse, I legitimately believe that the difficulty works in the game's favor. The character we control is not a seasoned slayer of building-sized beasts. He is forced to consistently struggle in order to complete his task, and this feeling is extended to the player grappling with the inane controls. The remake's updated scheme is certainly better than the originals, and after a while I didn't notice their insufficiencies besides the often wonky camera movement. If there wasn't a dedicated button set to focusing on the given colossi, it would be a much more prevalent issue. I found that in a generation in which games pride themselves on having multifaceted and complex systems, Shadow's mechanical beauty lies in its unabashed simplicity. There are only a few ways to interact with the world: navigation via the light trail, which is basically just following a straight line, riding aggro, Wander Steed, which admittedly makes The Witcher 3's Roach look good in comparison, but going back to my earlier point, I believe it also adds to the atmosphere, archery, swordplay, and climbing. Everything you need to defeat the 16 colossi roaming the world is there. Each encounter is a puzzle in and of itself, with the challenge lying in how to mount the gargantuan beast, scale it, and pierce its weak points. That's it. There are no other NPCs to interact with besides certain stamina-increasing animals, no other noteworthy challenges to complete, just the hunt. You could consider the game to be open world, but with no side activity to speak of, it certainly doesn't feel like it. Each area feels direct and distinct enough to not encourage off-the-beaten-path exploration. This keeps the pacing intact and prevents the experience from becoming a slog of meaningless side activities while also making you feel like you exist in a larger world. Hunt the beast, fight it, repeat. This styled minimalism carries over to the game's plot. The protagonist seeks to bring back a young woman, Mono, from the dead with the help of a spirit known as Dorman. The entity's one caveat is that Wander must find and rout each of the 16 colossi roaming what is known as the Forbidden Land. It is at first glance a classic video game plot, with a sword-wielding hero defeating impossible odds to save the life of someone he loves, very much in the vein of The Legend of Zelda, but that is about where the comparison stops. As mentioned before, each time you come closer to succeeding, the more of the weight of your actions begins to take its toll, and the questions of morality sink in. The unmoving stone faces of the colossi are equal parts fearsome and sympathetic. Their groans and howls exude a feeling of helplessness that, when coupled with the astonishingly well-produced score, crush any barbaric satisfaction that other games of the same breed rely on for its fun. Instead, the gratification comes from solving just how the hell to get onto the damn things, and then regretting it when it is all said and done. The size of the creatures themselves is second to none, and I am grasping at straws trying to imagine how this game ran on the PS2 with as much environmental freedom as it has. Never before in a game have I felt such sheer scale of this magnitude, not just with the colossi but with the world itself. While it does not take all that long to cross in actuality, it has a vastness to it that only strengthens the unending feeling of loneliness that permeates the entire experience. Bluepoint, famous for ports and remasters, may have created the greatest remake of all time. The presentation is absolutely incredible. The eerie atmosphere of the world is preserved, and the revamped score captures the soul of the experience and alone makes the title worth experiencing. This is no simple port job. There is painstaking care put into this that not only captures the original's vision, but also makes sure that this is a game people will be able to appreciate for years to come. It stands toe-to-toe with some of the best-looking PlayStation exclusives of this generation. Once the dust settles, I am anxious to revisit this game in a future video and dive into its spoilery intricacies, but until then, I cannot recommend this game enough, although I do acknowledge that this isn't for everyone. Our own dad Max Meyer had the polar opposite reception to it. This game is somewhat polarizing, but with the discounted price tag, I recommend giving it a shot. It is a true hallmark of the potential of games all these years later, while also highlighting the graphical fidelity of modern hardware. Truly an experience I will not soon forget.